Okay, this is part 7 of the three series, which is about Robert Nelson's life. And he's going to pick up from where he was before. This is July 31st, 2016.
All right. One of the strange things that happened somewhat previous to where I just left off, near the beginning of the 1980s, but previous to that. Remember I told you that I seem to have some kind of connection with tornadoes? Well, one time my mom and dad and I had gone over to West Coast Beach, Anna Maria Island, Anna Maria Beach. My dad, being in the school system, had a special meeting he had to go to, so he dropped my mom and myself off at the beach cottage, and then he was going to come back and join us later on that evening. So that afternoon, my mom and I went in swimming. It was back in the 1970s. And everything was going great, and then all of a sudden there's this weird undertow where there never had been one before. Now there was an undertow further north of what they call Beans Point, or the point, where the Gulf and Tampa Bay meet. But where we were, there was no undertow. All of a sudden there was. And the water got very choppy, had like a triangular effect coming out towards us. On either side of that triangle, the water was nice and placid like usual. Peaceful. It was a very still feeling in the air. We looked up in front of us, and off in the distance was a V coming down to the water. Dark gray, bluish, hint of black. It was a water spout. Although this thing was not a spindly little water spout. This thing was more like a tornado. We had to fight like heck to try to get out of the water. We almost didn't make it. We barely did. What they call the suck zone at the bottom of the funnel, and it was pulling us towards it, or trying to. Some people have guesstimated that perhaps there were extraterrestrials trying to form a storm out of one lone cloud. They're not supposed to be able to develop from one lone cloud. It wasn't a thunderhead. We wouldn't have gone swimming with a thunderhead. That perhaps somebody out there wanted to get rid of both mother and son. Not only would I be gone, but my mother couldn't be there to produce another of me. We did make it out of the water safely. People on the dock further down from us were pointing at the sky, and when we turned around, the funnel was gone. So I'm not sure what they were pointing at. It's left me with a weird, eerie feeling to this very day. Now, coming back up to the late 70s, early 80s, during that time, as I was getting close to the end of my flight lesson time, I went with a friend to the same guy I told you about, this engineer who worked for a flight industry that had settled in Lakeland for a little while. It's no longer there. But anyway, I used to fly out of that area and then go back home after that. Well, this one time, my friend and I decided to go to this little grassed-in airport that was actually way north of town. On the way, I kept developing a thirst for orange juice. So we stopped at a little 7-Eleven type of store, a little Jiffy store, convenience store. And my friend went in for a few minutes, came back out, handed me this little pouch type dealie with fruit juice in it. Well, it said lemonade. And I said, Paul, I was really hoping for orange juice. He said, well, they don't have any. This is what I had to get. I said, okay, all right, no problem. And I kind of just looked up at the ceiling of the car at the moment and said, I was really hoping for lemonade. Well, I opened this thing up on one end, stuck the straw in, took the first sip, and it was orange juice. I handed the pouch over to my friend and said, taste this. I didn't say anything about what it tasted like. I just handed it to him. He tasted it and said, orange juice. They must have made a mistake with the packaging, which could be. Frankly, I think I really kind of slummed it a bit. I went from turning water into wine to turning lemonade into orange juice. Wow. Like I said, I think humor is a must. It really did happen, though. In the early 1980s, I began teaching at the local sheltered workshop for the mentally handicapped adults. And I began noticing that, to me, what we call mental retardation may have to do with the inability to access what has been learned. These people, it's not that they don't learn, they do. It's just that for some reason, it's difficult for them to access what they've learned. And we take that for granted. So I kept finding ways to try to get around that, again, using neuro-linguistic programming, things of that nature. At the same time, I was fortunate enough, I had the very definite good fortune to adopt a dog from the SPCA. The dog's name was John Boy. He was a Westie, and he had this kind of a sad look like the John Boy character on the Walton's TV program. I didn't name him. He was named by whoever was fostering him. So they told me at the time that if he hadn't been adopted that day, that his foster was going to adopt him. So I lucked out. I adopted him, took him home, and he was with me from 1981, August of 1981 till near the end of July of 1995. My best friend, more like my brother, I call him my brother, spiritually extremely advanced. He was Tiger reincarnated. Now, about 3 nights after Tiger, the Chihuahua mix, passed on back in 1969, I got up to go to the restroom one night, and I looked back at the bed, and here's this white dog sitting on the bed, and I'm thinking maybe that's Tiger's energy form. That white dog was identical to the white dog that I adopted, John Boy, in 1981. Identical. I saw him years before. Maybe that was to make sure that I would be sure to adopt him. Our, as we call them, pets and ourselves, just as many times family members and friends and we get together from lifetime to lifetime. Animals are as eternal as we are. They're as much God as we are. Are they different than us? Yes. It doesn't make them any less God. Many times when I'm working on Facebook, I will refer to as humans who walk on 2 feet and humans who walk on 4 feet. Or I will refer to angels who walk on 2 feet or angels who walk on 4 feet. John Boy was a very meaningful part of my life for quite a long time. As the 80s began, around 1982, I began taking a course called A Course in Miracles. I would advise it for anyone and everyone. It's not about how to do miracles. is about how to recognize wholeness. Not reinstating wholeness. You can't reinstate what already exists. But you can focus back onto it. And similar to my teachings, in fact, A Course in Miracles can teach you on a very laid out, methodic basis how to change your way of thinking about yourself, the world around you, and your very identity. So I would say, definitely I would advise anyone who would be interested in taking that course to do so. It takes a year to go through it. It's gentle. It is very gentle. It takes you step by step. Now, enough said at this moment for that. During one of the evenings that I was going to go attend this course, some friends and I were having dinner at one of the restaurants nearby where the course was happening. Well, all of a sudden the lights started flickering, and at the time I was using a steak knife, a serrated steak knife, to cut some ground beef. Hamburger, ground beef. No bones, nothing like that. As I said, the lights around us began flickering, and then all of a sudden I couldn't cut the ground beef. The knife wouldn't go, and I'm thinking, what's wrong? Is there bone in there? And I looked down, and the knife blade had formed into a perfect letter Z. Of course, it couldn't go through the meat. At that point, I just said, oh shit. I asked my friend Paul for his car keys. I got up and went and sat in his car and missed the rest of my meal. Because it seemed to me like things like this were beginning to happen even when I wasn't intending it. I wasn't very happy about that. One thing about psychism is it will gather its own steam as it goes along. Again, never let it become the master. It's only a tool. If you find that it seems to be gaining its own power and its own determination, it's time to back away from it for a while. Most importantly, concentrate on who you are, because then what you give off is going to be healthy and helpful in a spiritual sense and in any and every other way for those around you and for you. I would say that that the Course in Miracles had a lot to do with unlocking who I know that I am and who I knew that I am. Let's see, I'm trying to think how I want to put this. During this time, I was aware of ET influences in my life. I still tried to keep that to the background. I didn't want it to come to the foreground. There had been a friend of mine in the 70s who saw a UFO one night when she was with me, and she decided that she wanted to link me to that, as though I was Uri Geller, who also was linked with UFOs. And I told her, I said, look, my abilities don't come from space. They don't come from the ETs. They don't come from UFOs. They come from who I am and who you are. They come from God. I think she wasn't very happy with my saying that, because she was going to try to build on this almost as though she was Andrei Paharich to me, as he was to Uri Geller. And I wouldn't let that happen.
He was what, like his PR man or something?
Well, not really. He was the man who helped him come from Israel to the United States so he could be tested at the Stanford Research Institute. He was a scientist.
He was a scientist.
A physicist.
But he was very much about, trying to promote him and...
In many ways, yeah. And well, Geller had to earn his own money over here.
Yeah.
And so he did shows to, be able to support himself.
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to clarify who he was.
Okay. That's the direction I probably could have gone, but I didn't want any part of that. And I chose not to. Let's see. I'm trying to think of how to take this into different periods. All right. One day...
Let me ask you this. In the beginning of that that phrase you said when you really started becoming aware of ETs.
Yeah.
But I mean, what if you could maybe explain kind of what you meant by that? Because I think I know, but I mean, for the video, because you had already been well aware of ETs since you were little, and most of that wasn't very good. So you're saying here later in life you really became aware of them. You're kind of talking about in a different way, right?
Yes, and what I had tried to do from the 60s and 70s was to suppress it, to be aware of the fact that these things were happening to me, but I didn't want to concentrate on it to the point where I would live in fear all the time.
Yeah. So you hadn't been having any real positive interaction with ETs. It was only pretty much when they picked you up.
Yeah.
The only other beings that you were communicating with psychically was mostly like Michael and God and a handful of other individuals, and you would do channeling sometimes for people.
I sure
where
did.
you would channel people. Had you done that yet in this part of your life?
In fact, even from about the early 70s on, I was channeling.
Oh, okay.
Finally got to where I was able to do transmediumism.
Well, since that goes with the time period that we've already kind of covered, let's backtrack a bit and why don't you discuss that a little bit too?
Okay,
your experience channeling and what you think about that, and
one of the people I channeled for most was this medical secretary. I began channeling the Archangel Michael, whom at that time I called Archon. And I'm not going to go back to the definition of Archons again. That's in the previous one.
You covered it.
But his information was amazing. I remember one evening I did a session with Archon Michael for some people who had lost their daughter to meningitis. It took her life.
Right.
And they wanted me to see if I could contact Michael to find out about their daughter, how she was.
Yeah.
Well, at one point while this session was going on, and it was very good because they took a picture. He told them to take a camera and take a picture of the area around me. And it showed the picture very kind of dimly of what looked like a little girl with a beach ball.
Oh.
And it was fuzzy and hard to make sure, but it was their daughter.
And as you were channeling Michael,
yeah,
so we could kind of like say, Michael, told them this.
Yeah.
And they did that, and then later, it was later. Or was it a Polaroid picture that they could see right away, or?
Mm-hmm. Polaroid.
Oh, neat. Okay, so they could see right away.
Yeah. I think they called it a Polaroid swinger back then.
Well, that's pretty good because Polaroid film, was never a really high quality film. It was more for the quickness and convenience.
This one was a little push the button and it comes out.
Yeah, I mean, usually you'd use a much higher speed film, to catch more light and everything if you're going to do some of that. So for it to turn up on a Polaroid film is pretty cool.
I think Michael wanted to give them something they could hold in their hand as proof and see that their daughter was doing fine and very happy. At one point, a nurse who was also in on the session asked Michael for other proof of who he was. And he told her, okay, try to take the pulse. She came over and couldn't find it. She tried my wrist and there was no pulse.
Right.
Then she said, I don't understand this. And he said, well, that's because by your standards, my son's dead. He refers to me as his son on the earth.
Right.
And for those of you who are aware of Urantia and other teachings, Christ Michael means something. I'm the son of God by way of Michael. Gabriel did the announcing. Michael did the deed. So during the session, he answered her and said, humans seem to think that the quality of life is held within the beats of a pulse. And he said, and you're wrong. He said, my son exists in my mind because I hold him as alive. And he'll be returned to you, and his pulse will be returned when he comes back. Well, at the end of the session, the nurse came back and said it was an irregular pulse at first, and then it became a standard pulse. He did that to prove that he represents the power of life beyond what seems to be death, and that he represents heaven's generosity and beneficence. Okay. Again, you will hear this again later about another session, but that's for in the 90s, when we start talking about the 90s.
Are you going on to something else? Because I want to ask you something.
Yes.
Okay. So when you say that you came here through Michael, as it were, excuse me, if you could enumerate on that a little bit, maybe in this life, the difficulties that your mother had conceiving you, and then how it was that the virgin birth happened 2,000 years ago. Because again, we're going to tie in some of the that life, because it's very much come full circle with what you're about in this life, and come to the forefront again, and of course anyone who's gotten this far definitely would like to know and understand more about that, and that's a very hotly debated aspect.
Yeah.
So whichever one you want to do first. We have roughly 10 minutes left.
We'll deal with this life. In this life, and this gets to be kind of weird, but what about my life isn't? My parents tried for 7 years to have a child. They weren't able to. My dad went to his doctor. His doctor said there was something different about his semen, and they would never have a child.
He had bad swimmers.
Whatever. I have to advance on this a little further into 1991, because it's not going to make sense if I don't. In 1991, my dad told me he was an extraterrestrial. That's probably why his DNA and my mom's DNA didn't connect together properly.
Yeah.
When he first stated this to me, I said, "You mean in a past life, Dad? You're an ET in a past life, you're a human in this life." And he said, "No, more like this life." And I said, "I don't understand, Dad," because I'd been telling him about one of the many abductions that happened to me. And he was telling me what was done to me in different abductions. He said, "That's what that race does." He wasn't part of that race, he was a different one. He told me what he did on board the spaceship that he had been on. At one point he said, "Well, I worked with them." And I said, "Oh, wait a minute, you worked with ETs?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "I don't get this. What, like in an exchange program, they get a human, we get an ET or something like that for a matter of months or years or whatever?" And Dad said, "No, I was one of them." And that's when I said, "You mean reincarnation?" And he said, "No, more like this life." Then I said, "Well, then they would have had to have done something with my mom to make it possible for an extraterrestrial's semen to mate with a human's ovum to bring about a hybrid me."
Mm-hmm.
Remember, I told you I was born a month premature. That's when my dad told me about the fact. I knew already that they had tried for 7 years to have a child and couldn't. Then I came along.
Yeah. Then one day.
Then things began making a lot more sense to me. And as I've explained previously, in this life, as with 2,000 years ago, heaven needed a being composed of 3 aspects. 1 divine, Michael, God. 2 extraterrestrial. 3 human. In order to bring all 3 factors together to help guide the future for the multiverse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I came to be born this time. I asked my dad, I said, well, Mom's never mentioned being on board a UFO. And he said, no, of course not. She's human. They wiped her memory.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I was real little, and I only know about this because my mom's told me about it, she got up one night, my dad wasn't in bed, he was at the kitchen table drawing something. She said, Bill, what are you drawing? He said, well, it's anti-gravity device. It's simple, it's child's play. And that drawing got lost. I wish, oh man, I wish I could have gotten a hold of it. Think how much money I could have, anyway. But that's, my dad was a human like E.T.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever get a feel for, I think you told me that he never did tell you, but did you ever get a sense of, like, you know, what his origins were? Like, was he, you know, maybe, you know, Pleiadian?
Yeah,
or
Pleiadian or Lyran.
Okay.
Definitely not reptilian.
And they're overall they're very intelligent and peaceful races.
Very, very spiritually advanced.
Yeah, they have plenty of technology, but they're not known for warring.
No. That just, I remember after that meal, he and I were eating out on one of the restaurants in the south part of town. I remember after that going home and pacing the floor for a little while and thinking, oh my God, all of this is falling into place and making sense. No wonder.
Yeah, yeah.
As for 2,000 years ago,
We got 3 minutes.
If I say what I need to say there, it's going to be stepping on some toes.
Who cares? I mean, this whole series, Bob, is is revelatory. So you might as well just say it plainly. How did it happen?
Michael's an ET, but he's not an ET in the form of what you would think with a spaceship and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Well, he's a time spirit. He doesn't occupy a physical body.
He's a non-terrestrial. We'll put it that way, rather than just saying an extraterrestrial. He's the one who actually appeared to my mother, Mary.
Yeah.
Who was also my mother in this lifetime, by the way. And told her she was going to conceive or had conceived a Holy Child. Actually, Gabriel did the announcing. It was Michael who did the job, who made it happen. And it was done almost simultaneously.
So it was like she picked up again on some craft and inseminated or something?
Yeah.
Now, Michael not being, physical.
He can be if he wants to.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I'll never forget the time I saw a reflection.
So he manifested, he manifested semen and everything.
Apparently.
You think for this?
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a lot about it I still don't fully know either, and haven't asked and don't want to.
Yeah.
I remember the time that I saw him reflected in my mirror, for example, when I was living in the cottage, the house and back. And I turned around to see him, and he wasn't there, but his reflection had been in the mirror.
Yeah.
How can you have that without a physical object?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
With him, it would be a matter of willing something into existence, and this gets into other sessions in the 90s that this will make a heck of a lot more sense to you then.
Okay.
All right. There are a lot of facets, like the star that led the wise men.
Yes.
When I birthed 2,000 years ago. That wasn't a star.
Oh, really?
It was a UFO.
Okay.
Now, this is not going to set well with standard churchianitans, and I understand that.
Yeah.
So
even though astrologically, supposedly that these astronomers have found that when they go back in time in the precession of stars and everything, that supposedly they see around that time. There was a star that crossed across the sky. Right?
Yeah.
But that's just, it's either that was a different time or else it's just happenstance. You're saying it was a straight up UFO that led them. So they were not merely just, these wise men were not merely just astrologers or astronomers, and I think they were astrologers, but they actually received a message from ETs, or?
Well, let's put it this way. They followed a star. They were led by another star.
Okay.
And the two coincided together.
Oh.
It used to be believed in very ancient times that something big on Earth would be announced in the heavens.
Yes.
In more ways than one.
Yeah. Okay.
There we go.
All right. That's the end of this one.